Hello, you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. I'm Askar Sharaliyev with the latest stories. Here are the headlines. 10 to 14. Inmates who staged the daring escape from the Aktau prison this June received their sentences. Even 5 years after the tragedy, Makbal Junusova still asks the authorities who killed her husband, the famous politician Zamanbek Nurkadilov. The test launch of the cableway linking Chimbulak and Medeu skating rink is held in Almaty. On Friday, the Aktau court announced a verdict on the boldest prison escape in Kazakhstan's history. Last summer, 21 inmates broke out of the detention facility using firearms and explosives. 5 days later, the law enforcement attempted to detain the group in a mountain gorge. In the ensuing shootout, 15 convicts were killed, and the surviving 6 will now serve lengthy prison time. 9 to 14 years in a high-security prison, the sentence is given to 6 organizers of the most daring escape in the history of Kazakhstan. 6 months ago, 21 inmates escaped a facility near Aktau using firearms and explosives. All of them were found 5 days later, but the law enforcement managed to detain only 6 people, with the rest killed in an ensuing shootout. The investigation lasted for several months. Finally, on November 12, the court closed the case. The prosecutors are satisfied with the verdict. We asked for long sentences. The difference with the verdict is insignificant. We asked for 17 years for the accomplice and he got 14. In general, we believe the verdict is appropriate. The trial over the prison leadership is underway as well. According to the investigation, the former administration of the Aktau prison failed to provide adequate security and had no information whatsoever about the planned escape. In addition, it granted long visits, but most importantly, it didn't prevent a refrigerator stuffed with arms from entering the territory of the facility. Defendants deny all accusations. I'm blamed for long visits and the refrigerator episode, but all of that happened when I was on vacation in February and March. In case the responsibility of the former prison administration will be proved, the defendants will face sentences of up to 10 years of imprisonment. Following the escape, the Penitentiary System Committee head Mayram Aubayev, as well as 2 of his deputies, resigned from their posts. In the meantime, the Shakhtinsk City Court added a year to the sentences of inmates found staging a video of beatings in the prison AK-159/6, which later ended up on the internet. Interfax reported that the court found the defendants guilty of group defiance of regulations of a penal institution. In May 2010, a video of inmate Evgeny Karaush being beaten by a prison guard appeared on the internet. The prison administration claimed the video was staged. This led to a number of convicts committing an act of self-mutilation in protest against the detention conditions. Later, prosecutors' investigation revealed that one of the inmates posed as a guard, another as a beating's victim. The third filmed the staging with another 2 accomplices. All 4 inmates were indicted. Maxim Kozhanov, who made the video, was found hanged in his cell shortly after the incident. 5 years ago, a prominent politician, Zamanbek Nurkadilov, known for harshly criticizing President Nazarbayev, was found dead in his Almaty home with 2 gunshot wounds to the heart area and 1 to the head. Officially, the tragedy was dismissed as a suicide, a decision widely questioned by the Kazakh society. Back then, the opposition leaders openly spoke of political motives behind the killing and launched an independent investigation with Social Democrats leader Zharmakhan Tuyakbay and former Supreme Court Chairman Utigen Ikhshanov as members of the Special Commission. Unfortunately, the investigation was later dropped due to the lack of access to the case materials. 5 years later, Nurkadilov's wife, Makbal Junusova, publicly appeals to the head of the National Security Committee, Nurtay Bakayev, as well as the head of state, asking them whether the true name of the killer will ever be revealed. The absurd version of Zamanbek Nurkadilov's suicide hasn't changed in the last 5 years. The authorities still say the politician shot himself to death 3 times. The wider picture is seen better from the distance. During the time since Zakir's death, many people had to rethink the events of 2005. The patriarch of Kazakh politics, Sirik Bilsin Abdildin, believes both Altanbek Sirinbayev's and Nurkadilov's murders, which happened in a span of 3 months, have the same contractors. At one point, running errands and helping Nazarbayev, he also served as a political contract killer. And his letter published recently in a newspaper shows that he not only made mistakes, but also admitted them while alive. Makpal Junusova is still grieving for her husband. The woman says she just now truly learns about him. During tours, she is often approached by strangers who say kind words about Nurkadilov. 5 years after Zakir's death, Makpal still asks Nursultan Nazarbayev to find her husband's killers.
Может, перед выборами он раскроет это убийство.
Maybe he could close the case before the elections if he wants to become the president again, because if the murder will remain unsolved, people just might ignore the elections altogether.
Народ может и даже вообще не пойти на выборы.
Zamanbek Nurkadilov's career began in his childhood. Disliked by all relatives, the boy learned how to roll with the punches. This skill became useful when he became a construction foreman and was noticed by Dilmuhammed Kunaev, who gave the young professional with attitude a jump start in politics. Nurkadilov climbed the entire ladder up to the head of the Almaty region with the main chair of the country in sights. Zakir's credibility has become the stuff of the legends, and the politician himself loved to share that the drive to go on was gifted to him since infancy. I grew up without a father. We lived in a semi-dugout with my mother, who worked. A year prior to his tragic death, many observers claimed Zamanbek Nurkadilov changed his mind about many processes occurring in the country. This resulted in a political crisis when the reputable politician challenged Nursultan Nazarbayev. Nurkadilov said he had a load of damaging information about the head of state, and it became clear why the authorities are afraid of the former construction worker. Then, on November 12, 2005, the body of the 62-year-old oppositionist was found with 3 gunshot wounds. Problems and perspectives of Kazakhstan's political system were discussed in Almaty during a roundtable organized by the Civic Alliance. Due to one-sided talks, opposition activists were not invited to the meeting. Still, the participants established a working group to draft a project of a single coordinating council of political parties. The conference, promisingly titled "The Issues and Perspectives of the National Political System," has gathered together representatives of 7 parties and various NGOs. The main topic on agenda is the creation of Coordination Party Council, a platform for dialogue and decisions-making. The project is warmly supported by the ruling party. Nuratan members say that during their time spent in the single-party parliament, they really missed the view of the opposition. The monopoly requires the presence of a constructive opposition so that opposition forces didn't feel like outcasts and had a real voice. If the opposition is constructive for the country, it should be implemented and heard. Not everyone embraced the old-new idea with enthusiasm. In the past, there have been already several attempts to establish a single coordinating and supervising party body, and something like that already exists now. The Inter-Party Council consists of representatives of 7 parties, both ruling and pseudo-oppositional. Their leaders believe it is better to develop an already existing dialogue platforms than create new ones. The Civic Alliance is an NGO which wins grants and has to show some output, which is understandable. Everything depends on how the issue will be raised and at which level the questions will be solved. Opposition members openly say they see no sense in organizations like these and will not take part in imitating farces. A platform is needed, no one can argue with that, but to turn empty talks into real solutions, it should be led directly by the head of state. If it was the case, then we could have tell our thoughts and ideas directly to the president and see whether he heard us and reacted. Otherwise, formats like that are just smokescreens. Supposedly, someone will tell our ideas to the president, who doesn't react in any way, and we're left waiting and guessing whether he didn't get the information or just chose not to react. We keep stalling at the last stage, which should actually produce the solution. Notable, the party bloc Narodovlastia, the democracy, ignored the conference and thus missed out on the forming of a work group. Organizers of the event say that they sent invitations to everyone, and it was the opposition's choice not to attend the gathering. Politicians in turn say they never received any invitations, which just shows yet again the true desire of the authorities and pro-governmental parties to hold a dialogue with the opposition. In the meantime, representatives of the oppositional political bloc Narodovlastia, the democracy, discussed on Friday the chaotic situation on the Kazakhstan's mortgage market. Politicians and social activists believe the government cannot deal with the problem of mortgage loans, which will soon reach the scale of a social disaster. Every third citizen of the country who trusted banks before the crisis and took mortgage loans can no longer pay them back. The total amount of population's debts already exceeds $4 billion. Economists believe the sheer volume of bad loans might completely block banking activities. The state subsidies are the only thing that keep the financial sector afloat. In this situation, the state has to take the responsibility. Instead, state officials say people are to blame, since no one forced them to take these loans. This is wrong. The state has to take that responsibility for banks' actions because essentially it allowed banks to conduct illegal actions. The way out of this credit collapse is impossible without an equal approach to all market players. Experts say that banks found manipulating interests or involved in other violations should be deprived of licenses, notwithstanding their affiliation with high-profile officials or other politicians.
Но ведь не в банкирах же дело.
This is not only about bankers. Let's just publish a list of major shareholders of these banks and everything will be clear. Let us compare the names of cabinet members and the leaders of banks people complain about. These will be the same.
Акционеров тех банков, на которые люди жалуются. Они же совпадут, как калька.
Experts emphasize that while banks were carried away squeezing money out of citizens' pockets, they virtually stopped the financing of the industry. Meanwhile, astronomical funds allocated to them from the budget are spent on the refinancing of loans and not on projects with good economic potential. The entire credit-dependent sector of the national economy is frozen without any obvious prospects of recovery. At the same time, real estate investors and mortgages are just a half of the victims, with the other half being banks themselves. In this situation, analysts have to admit that a country where the economy is kept afloat only by natural resources might not see a happy ending. If the situation will not stabilize within the next 2 years, 2/3 of all domestic enterprises may cease to exist. The problems of shared construction also require a political decision. On Friday, defrauded co-investors from Ust-Kamenogorsk, who were left with no money or housing, called an impromptu press conference to publicly ask the president for help. 3 years ago, they invested into construction of a high-rise in the center of the city. Unfortunately, the developer later ended up under the investigation of the financial police, and the project was suspended. However, even the arrest of the company's head cannot guarantee people will eventually see their apartment or money back. The impromptu open-air press conference of real estate investors from Ust-Kamenogorsk was held next to the construction site. The luxurious high-rise in the city center was never completed by the developer. For 3 years, co-investors complained about the issues to different state bodies. Now they use mass media to demand the direct involvement of the head of state.
Мы не видим выхода из этой ситуации, кроме как
We see no way out of this situation but to turn to the president. We ask him for helping us in resolving this issue.
чтобы он помог нам разобраться в данной ситуации.
Anastasia Sebelfeld paid $75,000 for her apartment after borrowing the money from her friends and family. 27 other people are in a similar situation. Many are still repaying their loans. The housewarming should have taken place back in 2009, however the construction was frozen. Later it was revealed that the developer Amazon Construction has mortgaged the building to a bank. My lawyer made an inquiry over the developer's condition and received a reply that the company's only property is an office and a car. Thus, we will get nothing back. In the meantime, the financial police said that the founder of the construction company was arrested. He can be imprisoned for up to 10 years, as in total the real estate investors paid his company over $1 million. After the investigation, we found and arrested some of property and other assets, and now we will be waiting for a court decision either to finish the construction or pay the money back. At the end of the conference, its organizers told reporters they drafted another letter to the president hoping to repeat the fate of defrauded real estate investors from Astana who managed to move into their long-awaited apartments after all.